Welcome to the deep dive. We're really excited you're with us today because we are kicking off something huge here. A journey into a mystery so big, so complex, it's definitely going to need more than one part to even begin to unpack. This is our very first deep dive into this particular hidden history, something that, well, it could seriously change how we think about World War II. So here's the big question we're tackling. What if that global war, the one in all the history books, wasn't just fought in Europe and the Pacific? What if there was another war, a desperate, secret, a truly total war happening on, of all places, Antarctica, the most remote continent on Earth? And what if that entire conflict has been deliberately, hidden, just buried under ice and silence for decades? That's the chilling idea we're starting to explore today.
And right there, that's the challenge for us, isn't it? Our mission in this deep dive, it's really to start gathering these fragments. Often, it feels like deliberately suppressed bits of information. We're looking into classified documents, things that pop up in, well, obscure corners of the internet, intelligence reports that you just know were never meant to see the light of day, and some incredibly rare first-hand accounts too, which just fly in the face of the official story. Our sources even pull from fascinating YouTube clips, personal testimonies that honestly sound unbelievable at first. What's really striking is how consistently things seem to have been obscured. So yeah, our mission today is to begin peeling back those layers, starting with those first kind of creepy trips onto the ice and the thick secrecy around it all.
Okay, let's dive right in then, because this first piece, it really hits you. We're going back to 1938. Germany, already deep in Nazi ideology, obsessed with expansion, sends this major expedition to Antarctica. Now, they said it was science, but what do our sources actually suggest was the underlying strategic goal? So far from Europe, even before the war officially kicked off.
Well, what's really telling is just how seriously the Germans took this. I mean, really seriously. To get ready for this hazardous trip, our sources say they actually consulted with the American polar explorer Richard E. Byrd, the legend himself. Byrd was, the expert on the region. And the Nazis apparently wanted his advice on what they'd face down there on the ice. That detail alone, Byrd, an American icon, advising the Nazis on Antarctic operations, it just adds this layer of, unexpected weirdness, doesn't it? It suggests some serious deliberate planning, something covert, way beyond just scientific curiosity.
It really does. Makes you wonder what Byrd knew, or maybe suspected. Okay, and then it gets even more intense. Just 1 month after the war starts in Europe, 1939, the Germans go straight back to that area they claimed, the one they called New Swabia in Queen Maud Land. They went back to finish what they started. So what was the intelligence picture then? What suspicions did this rapid return, right when the world was going up in flames, trigger for the Allies, particularly the British?
Oh, that quick return right then. That was a massive red flag. Huge. The intel coming in, especially to the British, wasn't talking about mapping icebergs. It strongly pointed toward secret base construction. According to our sources, the Germans weren't just planting flags this time. They were digging in. This wasn't just staking a claim anymore. It looked like setting up a hidden foothold for something much bigger, something they clearly needed up and running, even as the main war was starting.
Right.
Okay, now let's jump forward. Almost a decade later, 9 years after the war in Europe supposedly ended, Admiral Richard E. Byrd shows up again. But this time, he's leading the biggest polar task force ever put together. Operation Highjump, U.S. Navy, 1946. Why? Why such an enormous military force in Antarctica after the war? Seems like a massive use of resources for just, exploring.
That's exactly the puzzle of Highjump, and it's a huge point in our source material. Officially, yes, it was exploratory, but Byrd himself, and this is key, he publicly confirmed Operation Highjump had a primarily military character. His words, this wasn't just scientists with a few guards, it was a military op. And that strong statement led a lot of people, particularly in intelligence circles back then, to believe the real mission, the unspoken one, was to find and eliminate a hidden Nazi base, one supposedly still operating in Queen Maud Land, in that exact area, New Swabia. It was just an unbelievably large force for a supposedly empty continent. And you hear the skepticism, right? For years, people joked, who are they going to fight, penguins? The whole idea of a secret Nazi base there sounded like, Pulp Fiction. But how do our sources, the ones we're looking at, push back against that? What actual evidence do they point to suggesting this Nazi myth was maybe not a myth at all, maybe even disturbingly real?
Our sources really focus on documented German activity, not just during the war, but crucially after it ended too, which directly challenges that whole penguins dismissal. You take the sheer size of Highjump, combine it with this persistent German presence, it starts to make a sort of terrifying sense. And this is where, frankly, the claims get really wild. Jaw-dropping stuff in the source material. We're talking multiple eyewitness accounts. including claims reportedly from Admiral Byrd's own observations, describing disc-shaped flying objects, objects capable of flying, quote, from pole to pole with incredible speed. Now, let's be clear, these are extraordinary claims from our sources, but they state that Byrd himself, connecting these sightings with captured German intel, concluded the Germans hadn't just claimed land. They effectively parked themselves in Antarctica with tech way beyond anything conventional. And what's really stunning, a critical point in these documents, is the assertion that Hitler's seemingly crazy talk of underwater space wasn't crazy at all. It was apparently a veiled reference to advanced anti-gravity vehicles.
These weren't V1s or V2s, those were like the opening act. The implication here, and it's profound, is that these sources claim the U.S. already had the theory for this stuff, referencing a supposed Tesla patent for a flying saucer. Hence of hidden knowledge. But the same sources say America just, well, oversold the start, didn't build in time despite maybe having the theoretical keys. A critical delay.
Wow. So if you step back, Antarctica becomes this bizarre post-war battleground. You've got the Americans apparently returning, as the sources put it, with its head down, and the Germans, allegedly with technology decades ahead of its time that the U.S. forces just couldn't handle down there. It completely reframes the end of the war. But okay, if you thought that was the whole picture, hang on, there's another layer. In the background of this supposed U.S.-German clash, there was a third player, Great Britain. What's really strange, though, is how little we seem to know, or maybe how little we're allowed to know about what they were doing in Antarctica during the war. Why the silence?
Yeah, the silence around Britain is deafening, isn't it? Our sources float a really provocative theory here. That maybe, just maybe, the published stories about Operation Highjump, about Byrd's big mission, were actually calculated disinformation. The goal, to deliberately obscure the truth about British trips to Antarctica. The suggestion is Highjump was made public precisely so history would only remember one big, mysterious Antarctic mission, drawing all the attention away from the fact that British forces were apparently active down there a full year before Highjump even launched.
That's genuinely mind-bending. One huge military operation as a smokescreen for another. And thinking about Britain right after the war, it makes a twisted sort of sense. They won, yes, but the country was basically bankrupt and humiliated. An empire looking to, I don't know, regain some pride. So the sources suggest Britain might have wanted a final secret win, a decisive battle against any leftover Nazis in Antarctica, but crucially a battle never to be recorded in history books, a secret triumph to boost morale, perhaps.
And put this into context, too. Think about that weird diplomatic spat in February '46 over British postage stamps. Stamps, approved by the king, that caused this huge international row for a totally exhausted Britain. They showed British claims, including a map of Antarctica, which directly ticked off Chile and Argentina, who had their own claims. So you have to ask, why would Britain, broke as it was, risk a crisis over, what, ice? Some historians say raw materials, but that doesn't quite explain why British forces under Operation Tabarin were apparently there all through the war and right after. It feels much more like maybe a symbolic marker for a secret mission already happening.
Okay, Operation Tabarin. Let's focus there. Sources confirm it was set up specifically to monitor German activity in Antarctica throughout the war. We know the official British bases like Port Lockroy, Hope Bay on the peninsula, fine. But then, there's this other one, the really mysterious one. An unofficial, unnamed base deep in Queen Maud Land, in New Swabia itself. What's the deal with this base being never marked on official charts, and it being, astonishingly, just 200 miles from where the Germans allegedly built their secret base?
The fact it was never charted. This specific British base in New Swabia, that's incredibly telling, especially being just 200 miles from the alleged German site. It's a standout detail from the sources. And it fits a wider pattern, doesn't it? Britain, it seems, does have a history of suppressing awkward wartime stuff. National security, right? Our sources bring up examples like the whole Rudolf Hess affair, allegations of camps on British soil, knowledge about Nazi extermination camps. Antarctica, according to these accounts, is just another example of this suppression, this almost, well, panic sometimes about keeping things hidden. Here's the real kicker, the core for us. Over the years, some veterans of the supposed secret New Swabia campaign, they did leave clues. Stories told to grandchildren, written pages of an old notebook, things like that. And miraculously, these accounts, gathered from totally different sources, different places, separated by decades, they were found to have not a single discrepancy. Astonishingly consistent stories, ending up with private researchers talking about a forgotten battle, a terrifying encounter, stuff that just doesn't fit our history books.
So what does it all mean for how we understand World War II? I mean, we've barely scratched the surface of this alleged total war in Antarctica. The scale of the secrets just hinted at in these fragments. It's staggering. Suggests history is way more hidden than we usually think.
Absolutely. This whole narrative pieced together from, like you said, whispers and fragments.
Yeah.
It just throws up more questions than answers, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In the next part of this deep dive, we have to go deeper. What really happened inside that German base? What were the polar people? That's a chilling phrase from some accounts, maybe non-human. Something deeply unsettling encountered down there, mentioned by one survivor in this frantic radio message. And what was the full story? The terrifying reality that British soldiers supposedly faced in the ice. An encounter clearly never meant to be revealed.
So think about this. If a conflict like that, with hidden tech, deep mysteries, if that could be kept secret for so long, what other historical truths might still be buried out there, hidden under layers of official silence, just waiting for someone like you, a determined explorer, to dig them up? Join us next time as we continue this deep dive, plunging further into Antarctica's hidden war.